sentences 11 drug kingpins to 254 years as NDA daring escape. And that's on page 6. Nigeria drifting dangerously, but a judge tells Tinubu. Ali declares interest in Oyo governorship seat in 2027, draws APC supporters from 33 local government areas. NBA's opposition to judges' interference in party matters is right. And that's coming from Tambuwal, says, what we are seeing is now like Abacha era. The former governor of Sokoto State and leader of All Democratic Congress in Sokoto, Senator Aminu Waziri Tambuwal, said this while hosting newsmen shortly after the state congress of the party recently. That's coming from Tambuwal right there. And on page 8 and 25, we have ADC's neck dissolved. The NWCI-led Bala Nofyu left with us, and that's coming from the founder of ADC. On the Ask the Doctor page, and that's on page 9, my son's drug addiction problem, injections to lose weight, pawpaw and pregnancy, walking and my back ache, how to prevent kidney failure, too thin or too fat, always feeling tired, my sneezing problem. These are all questions on page 9. And moving on to page 16 and 17, varsity accommodation sparks outrage as students allege exclusion, and that's coming from Unilag Defense Hostels pricing structure. On page 24, 2027, Tinubu will defeat opposition in Northwest. Yilwatda APC national chairman says that. And on sports, my Atletico teammates are fantastic, and that's coming from Lukman. I want to play against Senslebiki, and that's coming from Osimhen. EPL, we must win rest games, and that's coming from Aino. And lastly, we have Messi, Argentina, sued for failing to appear in friendly. And that's all on Saturday Tribune. Over to you, Salah.
Thank you very much for me. I'll take some stories from the Nation newspaper of this morning. And the major story on the front page of the Nation newspaper says, ADC ticket, Kwakwansia, Amechi, others hit Atiku over superiority claims. The story is on page 4 of the Nation newspaper. With some riders, back-led convention affront to court, say Bala Abejide. All right, ex-vice president comment on Jonathan Rude. That's coming from former spokesman. All right, on page 2, Awujale, police summon Ijebu-Ode kingmakers over alleged bribery. On page 37, FCCPC denies banning airtime borrowing, blames operator for service disruption. All right, on page 5, airlines suspend proposed shutdown of flight operations. Osun 2026, APC's cohesion boost, Oyebanji's Guba bid. Saraki kicks over planned trial for co-people homicide. Stories on page 2. All right, on page 35, Edun Cardoso, inflation rate will drop to single digits despite headwinds. More time for banks that failed recapitalization deadline. All right, Tinubu signs 68.32 trillion naira 2026 budget, extends 2025 appropriation to June. Capital spending hit 50% as government target infrastructural growth. That story is on page 5. For some other stories that made the headline this morning, Benue adoption, 2 UTME passenger escaped from kidnappers. That's coming from the police. Wike begs runaway PDP members to return, says emergency coalition won't work. NSCDC uncovers suspected baby factory in Badagry. Abiodun Oshoba presents Yayi to Tinubu as Ogun APC Guba candidate. That story is on page 3. On page 5, we have other stories. The Emefiele court fixes for May for ruling in co-defendants trial within trial. El Rufai trial, gunmen invade principal witness home. On page 6, Uzodinma appoints 16 directors to strengthen renewed hope ambassador structure. INEC concludes second phase of CVR. Nigeria pushes to host African Monetary Institute in Abuja. Oluremi Tinubu others for honor. Why should Amopito resign? It's on the commentary page. You can grab a copy of the Nation newspaper of this morning to read some of the stories. Not yet time to quit. Atiku, quitters never win. On page 9, Ashiwaju and the body of leadership. Right, other stories on page 13. On the weekend life story, how we escaped death in boat ride that claimed 84 lives from Libya to Italy. And that's according to a survivor. All right, fishes, sea monsters, plucked, diseased, co-travelers' eyes, ears, other body part. That's a serious one. All right, let's see some of the other stories of this morning. We have a lot of advertorials, birthday celebrations in the Nation newspaper. All right, we'll go to page 29 on the Saturday political page. 2027 uncertainty as aspirant battle for Edo Assembly tickets. You also have Oshun 2026, APC's internal cohesion boost to Ibanji's Guba bid. It's degrading to label Senate rubber stamp. That story is on page 31. My journey from science lab to newsroom. Who is that? Shola Shokeye, or Shokeye, I beg your pardon. All right, on page 37, Akpabio Senegalese counterpart, strengthen parliamentary ties, push regional stability. APC consensus candidates will drive harmony, stability in Ogun. Kamara said that. All right, 2027, why I'm in the race for your governorship, and that's coming from Ali Sharafadin. All right, Oshun 2026, no threat. Intimidation can't stop APC victory. That's coming from Oyibanji. All right, and then we'll go to some sports story there this morning on page 39. Copa del Rey final. Lukman set for first silverware with Atletico. Osimhen named in Galatasaray, scored for Baskeshare clash. Guardiola title gun if we lose against Arsenal. And you have Yamal has an inflated ego, says ex-Barca forward Dugara. So don't see, forget about the World Cup. All right, those are the stories that made the headlines from the Nation newspaper. Of course, we'll go straight to the governor's activities during the week. Stay tuned.
Inaugurating the two committees, the Oyo State Governor, Engineer Seyi Makinde, said the initiative goes beyond routine governance, noting that it has strategic effort to reposition the state economy over the next 25 years. The governor noted that plans to upgrade the state airport to international standard and attract global flight are part of a broader vision to place Oyo State firmly on the global tourism map. He also emphasized the importance of long-term planning in tourism and hospitality development, cautioning against narrow focus on short-term gains.
What this committee, what you are supposed to do is show us the direction where Oyo State can compete, attract investment, and create opportunities over the next 25 years. Yes, we have assets. Absolutely. We have assets that other people around the world, even within this country, they may want to come and see. From Okeyamako in Igbeti to Igora to the same way you have the Gorge Dam, the deepest Gorge Dam. Yes, we do have assets that people may want to come and see.
Governor Makinde, however, stated that government alone cannot drive development, calling for stronger collaboration between the public and the private sectors. He stressed that investment innovation, and effective implementation must align with government policies to achieve meaningful results. The governor further highlighted the need for continuity in development efforts despite political transitions, underscoring the importance of building systems that can outlast individual administrations.
The organizing committee, ITS of your state 2026, that's the International Tourism Summit. They have been working on this summit since 2024 and have delivered 2 summits already. So this year will be the top. We have experience from what we've done before, and I sincerely hope that this year will be really grand.
Expressing confidence in the capacity of the community members to deliver on their mandate, Governor Makinde called for collective action to strengthen communities, improve hospitality standards, and create a welcoming environment for visitors from around the world.
All right, thank you very much for staying with us. Yes, we still have one more report for you, and it's on retirement. When you're planning on retiring, what are those things you should prepare for? What should you be looking forward to ahead for, especially when looking at retirement ahead of you? Stay tuned while we give you this report on that.
Retirement is a voluntary or compulsory exit from the formal labor force. It marks the conclusion of an individual's career or tenure with an organization. In Nigeria, the statutory retirement age for civil and public servants is 35 years of service or 60 years of age, whichever comes first. Professors retire at 70 years, while some other professions retire at 65 years of age. Some individuals also choose to retire after 10 years of service, having become entitled to pension benefits in order to pursue other interests. As a result, some retirees experience financial hardship with little to show for their years of service, largely due to poor savings culture. Consequently, they depend heavily on pension payments from the government or their former institutions, which are often irregular or insufficient to meet basic living needs. Speaking with BCOS News, the Secretary of the Nigerian Union of Pensioners, NUP, Oyo State Chapter, Comrade Shegun Abatan, explained that retirement planning should begin from the first day an employee receives their appointment letter in order to ensure a smooth transition.
35 years may look too long or big. Before you know it, 35 years will be there tomorrow, and then you start running around. So instead of running around, you will have been well stabilized before you get. If you have been working for 35 years and you have not planned for yourself to retire, and suddenly the 35 years remains one year or 3 months for you to go, there's nothing you can start doing then that will not, first of all, result into some jeopardy.
He noted that the length of service before retirement determines the amount payable as pension, and advocated that government should organize skill acquisition programs for prospective retirees as part of retirement preparation.
Though the regulation says that you should not do anything apart from government work, but there's an exception to certain areas where you can help yourself. For example, government does not frown at you going into agriculture along with your service. When I was teaching, I was having my poultry. I've been in poultry since 1976, and I'm still there. So you must have something else to assist you so that you will live a meaningful life while at work. And that leads to your retirement time. It is not when it is about 1 year or 5 years that you start running around to retire. It's then that some people say, I'm retiring next year. It is then he wouldn't know what to do, whether to be selling Coca-Cola or to be selling pure water. But if you had started something while still at work, before before the clock of retirement, knocks, you are already on that footing. So it will just be a way of easy transition from work to retired life. The important thing that I am hammering on is that the problem pensioners used to have is that gratuities don't even come on time.
Also speaking on retirement, the chairman of Local Government Pension Board, Oyo State, Honorable Akim Ige, advised workers to begin active retirement planning at least 5 years ahead, noting that it would help them to have alternative sources of livelihood while engaging in activities that do not place a strain on their health. He also highlighted various measures put in place by the government to ensure a smooth and efficient retirement process for workers.
From time to time, we do sensitization and training program for all the prospective retirees, those that are about to retire, so that they will be able to know the steps to take when they are planning for retirement. When it is time for retirement, then you have to submit some letter to their employers. I think it's 3 months before the retirement date. They should submit a letter to the employer. We now do all the necessary documentation. There we go through all the departments here. We go through audit departments, budget department, all the departments here, because we have to know when they were at work before they retire, hope they are not on any loan. All those things we have to do verification to know that they are not indebted to any government agency, whatever. So, and when they finally get the clearance here, after that clearance, they compute their benefits. That is all their retirement benefits. We have something we call the computation sheet. We now give them the computation sheet. That computation sheet, we now have the details of each retirees. They have the date they resume at work, their date of birth, the length of service, every time they use spend service, the amount they are due to collect.
They encourage prospective retirees to join associations such as pensioners' unions, where they can socialize and access useful information that would help them adjust better to life after retirement. Olamide Owolabi, reporting for Saturday Special.
All right, thank you very much for staying with us. This morning, we will be talking about something that is not really, should I say common, something we hardly hear about, something we hardly talk about, but it's a medical condition that should have more awareness, and that's hemophilia. And we'll be talking about hemophilia in Nigeria, challenges, diagnoses, and new treatments. To do justice to this particular conversation this morning, we have a consultant hematologist from the University College Hospital, Ibadan, Professor Taiwo Kotila. Good morning, Prof.
Good morning.
It's good to have you, ma'am. And we have a coordinator, Hemophilia Treatment Center, UCH, Mr. Oluwasegun Anjori. It's good to have you.
Thank you for having us.
Prof, let's start with what hemophilia is. Some people are even hearing it for the first time. What exactly is hemophilia?
Yes, you are right. Hemophilia is an inherited bleeding disorder that is commonly seen in male patients and inherited through the maternal route. And it results in spontaneous bleeding without trauma. And when there is trauma, there's prolonged bleeding. So bleeding is not arrested on time and may not even be arrested except treated.
I mean, going for the inherited bleeding disorder, yes. Prof, I'm not sure we really understand
yes.
it. Give us an in-depth understanding, especially for those who are not in the medical field, so we can have a proper understanding of what hemophilia really is.
When I said inherited, meaning that you are born with it, and not only are you born with it, you inherit it from either parents or both parents, but in case of hemophilia, you inherit it from one parent. It's a bleeding disorder in that within our system, God has made it such that our blood does not clot whilst we are moving around seated. Then our blood remains in a fluid state. And then when we have cuts, there are factors in our blood that seals up where the cut is so that we do not continue to bleed excessively from the site of injury. But in people with hemophilia, one of those factors is deficient. And so that's why they bleed when they have a cut, or even without cut, maybe they hit their hand or spontaneously they just wake up.
The bleeding just continues?
Yes.
So at what point does it stop?
Until you use a factor, you give that factor that is deficient. Then depending on the severity, for some they have factor, it's just that it is low level. So as the body builds up the level of the factor, the bleeding may get arrested on its own. But if there is another trauma or if the place is moved, the bleeding can start again.
Okay, I mean, I can see that just as you've both won, April 17 is awareness for, a day set aside for awareness of hemophilia, but it feels like we really do not have much awareness. Like I said earlier, some people have never heard of hemophilia, and what exactly are we doing? Or let me put it this way, why are we bringing so much awareness? Is it a deadly, is it deadly? Is hemophilia deadly? Let's start from, let's look at it from that angle.
Well, hemophilia is not deadly if you take the necessary actions and precautions. It is not contagious. It is rare. That is why people don't know about it. Even I know of somebody who has hemophilia, a young man, who thought he was the only one that ever has the disease, until he came to UCH and he was told that, no, you are not the only one. Then he met others. So because of the rarity, that's why. So there are many people going about who have hemophilia. They don't know, and they don't know there is help. That's why we want to create this awareness, not only for people who are affected, for those people who are not even affected, to let us all be aware, so that when we see somebody in our neighborhood or family with things that we suspect might be hemophilia, then we can advise them appropriately to seek help.
Okay, let me come to Mr. Oluwasegun Anjori. Mr. Oluwasegun, it's good to have you on the program.
Thank you.
When Prof was speaking just now, she mentioned hemophilia as a disease. And I'd like us to expatiate and possibly speak in a language that people can understand. Simple, language. Now, let's look at hemophilia. What causes hemophilia? She also mentioned factor. You know, the factor. Can we break it down?
Yes, thank you. First, the coordinator for the center in usage. Second, the coordinator of people living with hemophilia. I'm also an hemophilia.
Oh.
Yes, so
Okay.
me, I'll talk practically.
Okay.
Yes, it's not deadly, but it can be deadly when it's not well managed. For you to manage any disease, you must first have blood in your system. But when
Is
this
it a disease in the first instance? I think you should tell us why you say it's a disease. Let's.
Well, I'm not a health practitioner. Okay? I'm a patient, a coordinator for the center. I make sure the treatment, people get treatment as at when due.
Okay.
But I will tell you briefly about my little knowledge and my experience personally. This disease is past, just like Prof has said. It's not contagious. That means it cannot be contacted from one person to another, but can be passed from parents to their children. Actually, female is usually the carrier. Yes, but it presents itself from male child. This Prof will talk more about that. In male, there is X and Y chromosome for the blood cell. For in female, there is 2X chromosomes. But for male, in one of the chromosomes, there is deficiency in X, the X. But because male carry only one X chromosome that is deficient, that makes them to have problem. But for female, because the 2X, there's 2X, one has problem, the other one is okay. So that one will have cover for the part, so that they will not present any issue. So that is just the difference.
Okay. So you're going to talk about the causes. What causes? For you have talked about it scientifically.
Yes.
But let's talk about it in a general language.
Okay.
So if a man or if a woman, a man and a woman have sexual intercourse, there are chances that when the man have it, it will reflect, it will be symptomatic. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, yes.
And so can we get the explanation in that format so that, you know?
The issue is, just like Prof has said, one of the protein that clot blood is lack in both female and male, but it doesn't trouble female child. Unlike female is just the carrier. They carry disease, but when they have male child, that child will have problem.
Yes, male child.
Yeah, exactly.
When you noticed, I mean, as someone who has hemophilia, when you noticed, how did you notice? What were the first symptoms you were seeing that made you go to the hospital and you were diagnosed of hemophilia?
This is for the attention of the gynecologist. The first time it will present itself is when the child is circumcised, the male child. When they circumcised, normally the bleeding has to stop for after some time. But in a person living with hemophilia, it will not stop. In fact, it can go on like that for 2, 3, or even 5 days. That is when you know. But the that is like hemophilia, that people bleed like that. But you have to diagnose the child to know if actually is an hemophilia patient.
But Mr. Angela,
Yes.
Mr. Anjorin,
Yes.
thank you. At what point did you know you had hemophilia?
Yes.
What were those symptoms you had that made you go to the hospital and hemophilia was detected?
The major thing is bleeding.
Okay.
The bleeding will not stop.
Was it from your childhood or
The
as
first
an adult?
The first stage is from the child. As soon as the child is circumcised, that is the first time you discover after the test that this child is an hemophilia, because the bleeding will not stop. The difference between, let me tell you, the difference between an hemophilia patient and other disease is just the bleeding. There is no other thing. They live normal life, just like you. They can do any other thing except extreme physical activities. Okay. Where when they stress a particular part of their body, they will bleed into that part.
Okay. Let's come back to Prof. Professor Kotila, I want us to look at the symptoms again. as an expert, what are those symptoms that you see? And then you also tell us some related blood diseases that looks like hemophilia.
Okay. Like Mr. Anjorin said, in this environment, circumcision is cultural. So that should be a bonus for us. So that when you circumcise a child and is bleeding, not controlled, you begin to...
The male child?
The male child, of course, definitely the male child. And if you, for a doctor, if an adult in this environment, or even somebody who is 2 years, comes to the clinic as is uncircumcised, that's raised a flag for us. Why is this child not circumcised? Some will say, oh, it is in our family, we don't circumcise early. Then we begin to suspect that hemophilia might be running in that family. So post-circumcisional bleeding is the first heralding sign. Then as a child begins to cut their teeth, a mother who is experienced will say, this child bleeds. It's supposed not to bleed while cutting his or her teeth, or it should be minimal. Another red flag. Then the child begins to crawl. You see bruises. Another red flag. If a mother is discerning, could bring the child to the hospital. But if the child continues, you didn't notice that troublesome jumping up and down, they begin to bleed to their joints because they use the joints often. You see that it's swollen, it's tender. So those are signs that a child probably has hemophilia. As to other diseases that may mimic hemophilia, we have different types of hemophilia, so we'll leave that aside. There's another disease we call von Willebrand's disease. It's so similar to hemophilia, but the inheritance pattern is different.
What did you call it again, Prof?
Von Willebrand's disease. Okay. So that from the inheritance pattern and some other things, we differentiate it. There are other bleeding disorders, but most of them are not inherited. So when we take the history of the family, it is not a family thing. It just starts, maybe they say in the last 3 months or 6 months. So those are ways by which, and those ones are acquired. So something in the environment or something else has caused it.
I recall that when I was growing up, there are some children that maybe they hit their nose or the blood will come out of their nose. Is that also hemophilia? Is it, or you also, I'd like you to also share with us some myths and misconceptions about hemophilia.
Yes, nosebleed is common with people that have von Willebrand's disease.
Oh.
Yes, nosebleed is not a sign of hemophilia. And if you notice, people have, maybe all of us somehow had nosebleed or know somebody in primary school that they just, and some will even trigger it just for attention's sake. But with time, they may grow out of it. So that's somehow the pattern of von Willebrand's disease. Although if it's the severe type, they may not grow out of it. So that's a difference. We say that von Willebrand's is subcutaneous bleeding, that is from the nose, and lining of the skin and things. But hemophilia, it is the factor that, with von Willebrand's, if it is not severe, with time, it stops, the bleeding stops. But for hemophilia, it is unlikely that it will stop.
No, Prof, I'd like to call your attention to something. Ordinarily, if one has an injury and bleeding does not stop, I want to believe, by my layman's thinking, that it must have something to do with the skin texture. I am just thinking, I might be totally wrong. Because if there's a cut, and I'm expecting that my blood should clot, and it's not clotting, what link does this hemophilia have with skin, the skin texture, the strength of the skin? Because the skin plays a role.
You are right. Hemophilia does not have anything to do with the skin texture, but there are some other disorders, platelet disorders, or age when the elasticity of the skin is lost. We call it senile purpura. You see in old age, they have dark blotches occasionally. That's skin thing, and is usually a mild thing. And even when they come to the hospital, we rarely do anything. We just reassure them, unlike hemophilia. For bleeding control, there are many stages. Apart from the factor that we say is deficient, the blood vessels play a role. And then the platelets play a role, another blood thing in the blood, and then the skin somehow. So all those play a role in controlling blood. So when we have a cut, our blood vessel contracts, trying to control the blood from flowing. Yes, that's possible in hemophilia. But if the blood vessel contracts, is to narrow the blood vessel so that all other factors can have time to interact and stop the bleeding. So even though this blood vessel has contracted in a hemophilia patient, but because the factor that are supposed to come together is not there, that does not control the bleeding, so they continue to bleed.
Earlier, Mr. Anjorin said we see more of it in men than women. Why is this so?
Well, like he explained, we call it sex-linked disorders. These generally are disorders in which the women are the carrier. They have the disease, but they do not manifest. Yes. So their sons would manifest. And this is because a woman has 2 X chromosomes. The man has 1 X, 1 Y. A woman who has 2 X chromosomes, very rarely will the 2 be involved, although it's possible. If it is involved, then they will be deficient too. So the one that is not affected compensates for the one that is affected. So these 2 have low levels of the factor, but is not to the extent that they begin to bleed, although some women bleed. Let's first leave that aside. So the second X chromosome protects that the affected X, so the woman does not, but she has it in her system. So when she has a child and gives the child the X, the child gets the Y from the father. So there is a deficient X, but there is no other X to control it.
Prof, according to what you just said now, there are some women who also manifest hemophilia, but we have more of men showing symptoms. Now, these women, does it also appear in the form of a monthly menstrual cycle? You know, we've heard women who say they bleed for, some people go as far as 14 days. We've heard some who say 3 weeks. You know, they just continue to bleed without, it doesn't stop. Is that hemophilia also showing in women?
Yes, it's a possibility, very likelihood. But you know, gynecologists have many things that could cause prolonged bleeding, and they would, of a necessity, just investigate a woman. If they've looked at those things, we want it to be in the consciousness of the gynecologist too, that hemophilia could be, because for women too, menorrhagia, prolonged menstrual bleeding is a way that it can manifest for the women who may be symptomatic, who are carriers, who may be symptomatic, or who may be hemophilia themselves because they have 2 abnormal chromosomes, X chromosome, or they have 1 affected chromosome, but the other chromosome that is supposed to be good is not really good, so cannot protect. So menorrhagia or excessive menstrual bleeding is a way that it can manifest in female.
Okay, please, I'm still coming back to you, Mr. Njeri. Okay. But I'd like Prof to deal with the X and Y. Imagine a woman who has hemophilia and she marries a man with hemophilia. What's the danger? We need to look at it.
Yes.
Maybe you should answer that first, because, again, I'm beginning to think that the XY chromosome, why is the Y not strong enough? Because if men are so strong, one would have expected the Y to play a role. What's this protein we're talking about?
You know, when we talk about X and Y chromosome, they are genes. Yeah. So the genes for those factors are on the X chromosome.
What's this factor you're saying, doctor? What's this factor? Maybe you should give us a language that...
Yes, that's the best way to put it, because if I say factor 8, factor 9, you know, in the cascade, we have what we call the cascade to control bleeding. We start from 12, 11, 10, 9. That's the way the factors classify. So just not to bog people down, we don't want to begin to mention factor 8, factor 9, factor. We just say factor. So there are many factors in that line when bleeding, when clotting. As soon as there's trauma, a message is sent to the brain. So the brain begins to act, asking different factors, to come together, to save the day, like you have said, to prevent bleeding. So we want to just use the word factor for those elements in the blood.
So let's go back to the question.
Yes, which will be very rare for a hemophilia man to marry another hemophilia female, because a hemophilia female is very, very rare. But peradventure, a carrier or even a hemophilia female, there will be, that means that all their sons, instead of the usual one or two sons or occasional sons, all of their sons will be
carrier.
Will have hemophilia, because the X they will get from the mother, both the X are deficient, so they will only get Y from the father. So that's it. And then there are females too who end up having hemophilia because the X of the man is deficient. The 2X of the female is supposedly deficient too. When it comes together, so that's the scenario that we'll have in the home. But it is very rare. I've never come across or had anything like that.
Okay. I'm sure that very soon we'll get there. Someday we'll find someone or a couple with it, because if the knowledge is not expanded, people will not be aware, and they will just marry once they have checked their genotype and their blood group and they find out that it's matchable. But you have not told us why the Y is not strong, does not have that protein that can, the same way the other X may have had the strength to assist the other
I
X.
use the word strong. It's not strong in that sense. The genes for those factors are not on the Y chromosomes. They
don't exist at all.
The way nature makes it, they are on the X chromosome. It's like there are some genes that are on the Y chromosomes that are not on the X. So on our chromosomes, there are all genes. Maybe gene for tallness is in one chromosome.
The content.
Yes. So for those factors, those genes are located on the X chromosome.
Okay, let's go to Mr. Njari. Mr. Njari, you are an hemophilia. At what point were you diagnosed as an hemophilia patient? At what age? What was the scenario? What actually happened?
It's a long job. You know, I'm just laughing. Well, I'm lucky. You know, she said about different stage. We have moderate, we have severe, we have mild. My own is mild. I still have some clotting factor in my system, so I don't really have problem like that. But before it was discovered that I'm hemophilia, I have a brother that died, last born of the family. He had an accident. He was rushed to the hospital, but they don't know. Nobody could tell them that time that he's an hemophilia, so that they will know how to handle him. So my own was discovered at 14, age of 14.
Did he survive the accident?
No, he passed now.
Oh.
Dr. Kotila was part of today I'm around 50. So I've been living with it almost 50 years. So, but I don't really have, if you see me, except that the way I work, I don't have that kind of problem. I do normal things, just like I said the other time. An hemophilia patient, if it's well managed, you will live normal life like others. In fact, you are stronger than others. I don't have malaria, I don't have other diseases. You live normal life like others. So I'm just saying it to educate public, so that they don't segregate people living, can do any other work except extreme physical activities like boxing, like taekwondo. They can't do that. Please, then for me, before that age, I've gone around, I passed through a lot, pains and the rest, except a doctor outside. I mean, that we consult that time. This thing looks like an hemophilia. let me introduce you to people and use it. So that was how it started. But for today, in 2018, thank God, the modern treatment came, and since then, it was I was able to manage, just like my other people, were able to manage the disease better. We live a better life.
You've not told us at what age?
14. I told you that the issue with present itself as a child when you are circumcised, but it was discovered that I had the disease at age of 14. So I was introduced to Professor Kotila now. She's retired. And Professor Shokumbi, sorry, okay. At that time. So,
Prof, you mentioned mild, moderate, and severe cases of hemophilia. And I know earlier you also talked about types of hemophilia. I think we should look at the types and how the moderate, mild, and severe comes into those types of hemophilia.
There are three major types of hemophilia. We have hemophilia A, we have hemophilia B, and we have hemophilia C. And it's there because of the factor that I mentioned that is deficient. For hemophilia A, it is factor 8 that is deficient. For hemophilia B, it is factor 9 that is deficient. For hemophilia C, it is factor 11. Hemophilia C is commoner amongst the Jews. So just to leave that. So hemophilia A and hemophilia B is what is worldwide, people can have. So as regards severity, we classify them into three groups: mild, moderate, severe. Of course, like the name implies, the severity of the disease will depend on whether it's a mild disease or moderate or severe. But it is the level of the factor in the body that determines whether it's mild, moderate. We have a way to measure it. If it's less than 1%, we say they are severe. If they have between 1 to 5%, we say that they are moderate. If they have 5% to say 30%, we say that they are mild. So those carriers don't have 100% like you and I. Carrier female would have maybe between 30 to 50%, which may be enough for normal activities, but occasionally they may bleed, especially during menses.
Okay. Looking at the classification you just gave us, especially the mild, moderate, and severe, what are those symptoms we see in? He said his own is mild. For a mild patient, the moderate ones and the severe ones, what are those symptoms or what are those things? How does it portray itself as?
He said he was diagnosed at 14. Yes, that's because he's mild. A severe patient will not wait till 14, especially a male. Definitely at circumcision. I saw you were surprised when he said he lost his brother. That's a history that is common. Many people, women will tell us, oh, I lost first child or so 2 children after circumcision. And that's why I said in the family, in those olden days, the family would put a law that no male child should be circumcised because they would observe that people die. So that aside, sometimes the way they bleed too, without doing the test, helps us to determine. Some, for those who are moderate and severe, they can bleed spontaneously. They just say, oh, I woke up, my knee is swollen, it's tender, it's paining me, or this place is swollen, it's tender. For the mild, it is only when there is trauma. Oh, I hit my hand, oh, I had this cut, I bit my tongue or something. So those are
mild cases.
Yes, mild cases. And even some mild cases, most times we rarely diagnose mild cases because they don't come to the hospital. They don't have
to manage it.
So that means the blood doesn't last that long.
Yes, they have issues, but they can cope. So, yes, I have this knee problem. People will just say, oh, it's arthritis, and then he will try to cope with it. You know that if your symptom is not so troublesome, you won't readily seek help. But if you have a knee swelling that for 1 week you can't go out, nobody will tell you to get to the hospital. So when they are moderate, they are severe, they get to come to the hospital. And then mild cases, if they have life-threatening bleeding, which may occur, they too would have to come to the hospital and a diagnosis is made.
Prof, sorry, please. You mentioned knee pain, swelling. Initially, I thought we were just talking about blood, severity of, or the blood doesn't clot, like you said. But now you're talking about swelling, you're talking about pains, joint pains. Prof, I think you're giving us something else different from what you initially explained. Maybe you should just let us know the symptoms.
When I said bleeding, I said after trauma, after a cut, but some may be spontaneous, that is without a cut. And the most common place where they bleed into without a cut are the joints. They can bleed into the muscles too. They can bleed internally. They can bleed into the brain. But the commonest are the joints. And once they bleed into a joint, it's swollen, it's painful. So they have pains too. And then sometimes because they are bled into a joint, there's a tendency for a repeat bleed into that joint. And so we have what we call target joints. That is a joint into which they bleed repeatedly. So whether we give them treatment or not, that joint cannot be the same again. So the function would not be as optimal. So they may have some deformity in that joint. So, because, blood, once it's outside the blood vessel, is toxic. So if it's in the joint, it begins to destroy the cartilage of the joints and so on and so forth.
And this is to talk of the mild symptoms. So what does the severe ones look like?
No, it's not just the mild, all of
generally,
them. But the severe person will have it more often. Will have those symptoms. Yes, the frequency will be increased.
Okay, so we have talked about a lot, and you have told us about the types. But I also want us to concentrate on this protein. You have said this deficiency in protein. Is it like the protein we get from some of this food that we eat? Or, if it's not, where can we get this protein? Is there a way we can build our blood to ensure that we make up for these deficiencies? I'm just thinking about it.
A protein is a protein. A protein is made up of amino acids, but it's just that there are different types of protein. The protein that we get in food, yes, they help us to build muscles and growth and things like that, and then we can get it. But this protein is not what we can get from food. It's in the blood. So if from blood transfusion, we can harvest the protein and get it separated, which is what is being done in treatment. So it's a protein, but it's not the type that we get from food. So you can't say, oh, they say I have hemophilia and a deficiency in one protein. Let me go and buy these multivitamins that has protein. No, it doesn't work that way.
All right, Prof. Mr. Anjorin, over the years, what is it like to live with hemophilia? How has it been for you?
Yeah, I said my own case is mild. If you adhere to the advice of the doctor, you will live a normal life. Even hemophilia, as I am, I'm a geologist. So I know when to stop, when to work, and the rest. So if you are able to do all those, you will live a normal, you can do anything.
Okay. Now, let's also look at other areas. You have just explained about the protein thing, and that takes us to the need for us to look at the percentage of people living with hemophilia. Can we look at an aggregate to say, okay, in Nigeria, in the last 5 years, despite the level of awareness, we have 20% of people living with hemophilia. Can we look at the percentage?
Yes, it's true. When we talk about prevalence of a disease, we go about percent. But there are times too for some diseases, when they are rare, we say how many per 1,000, how many per 10,000. So worldwide, hemophilia would occur in 1 out of 7,000 or 5,000 people. Yes, because hemophilia A is more common. Whereas hemophilia B, which is less common, would occur in 1 in 20,000 or 30,000. So hemophilia A is more like 4 times more common than hemophilia B. So if we go by that, let's even say it's 1 in 10,000, and we assume that we have 200 million people in Nigeria. So all of us in Nigeria, we should be having about 20,000 hemophilia people. But unfortunately, in our registry in Nigeria, we don't have up to 1,000 registered yet, showing that we have so many people out there who have hemophilia who we have not captured.
Okay, doctor.
Please let me add to what he said. I told you I'm a coordinator of people living with hemophilia in Lagos. We have order in other states. I think I would say roughly 1,000 for now. Those of us organized, the organized one. That is why I will say now, the issue now is diagnosis. We are still lacking behind. Even the treatment, we are getting treatment through donation, through World Federation of Hemophilia. I think government needs to do more on that.
When we come to what government should do, sir, you have talked about diagnosis now.
Yes.
And that takes me to asking Prof, how many physicians are expert on hemophilia? Because, I mean, we'll still come to the cost. What does it cost to maintain? Because I use the word maintain. You can't just treat, you have to keep maintaining the person with hemophilia. So, how many experts do we have? Just like we've talked about percentage of, how many experts do we have? Looking at brain drain and other things that are factors that may also reduce the numbers.
Hematologists are the ones that can diagnose and manage hemophilia. If my assessment is correct, maybe we have like 200 people who are already qualified in Nigeria, or at least we are less than 1,000 hematologists in the country. So as regards availability, but the good thing about hemophilia is any doctor with high index of suspicion can diagnose it. There are very rare diseases that will present like that. Oh, when I circumcised the child, he bled. Oh, when he has a cut, he bled. Oh, when he's crawling or he's bleeding into, yes, that's classical, that's hemophilia. So with that, you've made the diagnosis. But in medicine, we don't just make diagnosis based on history. We want to confirm. So it's the hematologist that will confirm. So making the diagnosis is not so difficult if we have a high index of suspicion.
So how do you test? What kind of test do you do? Yes, you're seeing symptoms, but now you want to confirm that someone has hemophilia. What kind of test? What does it cost?
Again, it's unlike, if we look at it, it's such a big disease if we look at it, but the testing too is not so big. There are levels. And the way making the diagnosis from history is easy. We have screening tests that we call coagulation tests. We have 2 major types, the PTT and the PT, that we can do for other things. Once we do it, the pattern that we see helps us to say this is hemophilia. But to really confirm, we need to measure that factor level. So once we do that, that's initial screening test, we go to the next level, and then we measure the level of the factor. Most hospitals cannot go to that level, but even then, the initial screening test suffices. But the problem with just that is that if I do the screening test, I will just say this is hemophilia. I cannot say whether this is hemophilia A or hemophilia B. I need to go to the next level. The next test to determine, is it factor 8 that is low? Is it factor 9? And then how low is it? Then I can say it's mild, moderate, severe, or it is hemophilia A
okay,
or
but
B.
don't go to treatment yet, Prof. Sorry, let me go to Mr. Anjorin. Mr. Anjorin, you are coordinating persons with hemophilia.
Yes.
Now let's come to people with hemophilia. Whether we like it or not, when it comes to the cases of hemophilia, you have advanced, I use the word, I beg your pardon, Prof, advanced knowledge about hemophilia. And the whole idea of having an association working together is to assist one another, such that before you get to a medical expert, an hematologist, you have solved the problem halfway, if not completely, in most cases based on experience. How and what have you been doing to help people as soon as you discover, or how do people join you? How do they know you? What have you done in the past to help people living with hemophilia?
Our group and the doctors, we are partner in progress. Okay. And with that then, with us, all these things we are talking about, we can be managed. Even the treatment we are talking about is gotten through the group at international level, through World Federation of Hemophilia. Each drug, the unit of God is international unit, and it's in dollars, it's in million. Yes. If we have to talk about people, affordability for each person, we can't. Other people, I mean, most people, hemophilia people are moderate living people, low cost people. For them to afford that kind of amount, it's not possible. So,
sorry. Yeah, the whole thing is getting more confused.
Okay. What I'm saying is,
no, I get your point. I'm not talking about, you're not talking about the cost of being able to manage hemophilia.
Yes.
And you're saying it's in millions.
Yes.
So how often do you take these drugs? Let's come to that.
Just like Prof has said, it depends on the severity of the disease. If it's mild, you don't take it. Like myself now, at least in the last 4, 5, 6 months, I've not taken a factor. Yes, I'm okay. But for a person with severe hemophilia, probably in 2-3 weeks, we are currently, there is one Boyega. I have a patient like that. He usually have this tooth problem. He bleeds from his gum, often down one. So he uses this factor often, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and so on. So it depends on the severity. For a moderate, that person with moderate hemophilia doesn't take it often.
So, but what's the cost like? Because you said,
before we go to cost, you are talking about their role. They play a significant role. Okay. You know, advocacy and then emotional support. Because many times, even before a patient comes to me, they have phoned Mr. Anjoni. Mr. Anjoni, I'm bleeding. They know he does it. Then you say, go to UC, then he will phone me. Or maybe we are saying, yes, he hasn't come for so many times. We won't have to. He will calm us down and say, yes, please, just help us see. I will talk to him, he will come. So support, emotional support, they give each other. And then there is this drug that he's talking about, modern drug that is from abroad. For a long time, we never had it. It's a woman who has hemophilia children. Mrs. Megan, I will mention her name, who looked for money and went for the conference and cried out to the people to say they need to help us. So that was how we got consignments, and they keep sending to us for free.
Wow.
Yes, so
how long this will continue is what we don't know.
Yes, and that's why we have to cry out. Like he said, I was going to say 99%, or let me be moderate, 90% of our patients cannot afford these drugs. They cannot. Even me, as a doctor, if I have hemophilia, I cannot afford.
So when they come to UCH for this treatment, do they get it for free?
Yes, they get it for free. But there are logistics. Okay. These drugs come, they get it from custom, they pay charges, they have to keep it in a place, so they need office space, they need a cold room. The place is in Kaduna, they have to distribute all over the nation. So each patient will pay contribution, dues, so as to maintain that and then to solve.
How much?
The dues is just a token of 5,000
monthly, weekly, monthly.
Wow.
Monthly, yes.
Are you saying 5,000?
Yes.
When some people can't even afford 1,000? No, I'm being serious.
Yes.
Because if someone is from, so what do you do when you have people who can't afford that 5,000 monthly?
What happens is this. Not everybody, those that cannot afford it, we still look into their case and help out.
Okay.
So we don't enforce. Even if we have people that have not paid up to 2 years, we still attend. The first thing is, the prof, she's just a mother and she has been doing well. Either you are consistent with dues or not. Once you have issue, you come to the hospital, she will attend to you. Life force. She will save the life force.
I think, I'm sorry for me, I think we need to go back to where we started our conversation from. If there's a way we can know before two people get married. If you remember, when he was talking about his brother, he said his brother had an accident, bled, and the rest is history. May his soul rest in peace.
Thank you.
But he had it, or he has it, his brother had it. How come two people in one family have this? Are you the only two that have it in your family?
Yes.
Do you have females?
Of course.
There are likelihood that they may also have it. So how can we ensure that even before we get to the stage of having children with hemophilia, can we manage this at the point where two couples are getting married? The advocacy, the awareness, what can be done to prevent more of this?
Hemophilia is not something that the prevention you do is don't marry this person, or it doesn't work for hemophilia.
Okay.
For hemophilia is to understand that is the maternal side. So when I get a patient, I want to ask the woman about her sisters. Your sister, how many sisters do you have? So like contact tracing, so that I know this your sister has 2 boys. How are the boys? Because sometimes in some families,
just to offer help.
Yes, they don't open up, or they may not know. A sister may be in our registry, has another sister whose sons are behaving hemophilia, but he doesn't know because the other person, yes, and then they don't know those things. So those are the important things. Mapping out the family tree and then looking at the mother's side to see, are there other people that we need to test? Are there other people that we need to reach out to?
Let me come to Mr. Anjari. You mentioned earlier we're talking about advocacy, and that's what the association is for. Prof also talked about cost and how you're getting international intervention.
Yes.
But apart from, the emotional security you give yourself in the association, what other benefits do people get to get from the group, from your association? How often do they reach out to you? What are those challenges they also face top of the society, and how, when they portray a symptom, sometimes people really might not understand what they might be going through. How do you help them in such cases?
The benefit, one of the benefits of what we are talking about. If you have problem, we are able to treat you. We can't afford those treatments. We're able to treat you free of charge. That is most important.
Major one.
Yes, the major benefit. The others of it, for now, as of now, because of the war, the supplies has really reduced. But there are other areas we advise, we help ourselves. You can use shea butter, do some other thing, do some therapy that will help. There is ice pack, so all those things we advise, we help ourselves. Especially those of us that have been living with it for long.
So instead of depending on the drug,
exactly. When it's not so much,
so that you have more
there are
drugs
things
to
you can
help
do that will help you.
And it suppresses the pain.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, Fumi, go ahead.
Then,
Yes, please.
another thing I want to say is this. The theme of this year is diagnosis, the first step to care. We've not been doing enough diagnosis. We've not. Just like Prof has said, they do PCC, she mentioned those
PTT.
yes, PTT.
PTT and PT.
Yes, those are the major ones. But the real confirmatory test to really classify either hemophilia A or B, people don't. It's not all that available in the hospital. Some as you say as, some other hospital as, but most of it is done outside.
Outside the country.
Outside the hospital.
Okay.
I mean
Commercial.
the general. Yes,
Okay.
yes. So we need government intervention on that. Once you diagnose, we are able to treat. Even treatment, even treatment now, we are getting treatment through donation. And people that are giving you things free of charge, at a stage, they will decide to stop. So government need to come to our aid so that they procure those material that we use for us and give it out as subsidized aid. Some people are giving us, we are not paying anything except those due. I think government need to look into that.
Okay. Prof, based on what he just said, I think we should look at the number of testing centers we have in Nigeria. I know you mentioned we have about 200 hematologists in Nigeria, which is not enough. But what about the testing centers? Like, on an average, how many do you think we have in Nigeria?
You know, all teaching hospitals should be able to make a diagnosis using the screening tests.
Okay.
So, but when you now go to determine what type,
The types.
and yes, they can use the method of the screening test, but it's cumbersome. So the technologists or scientists who do the work shy away from it. Although for us to make it easy, we pull samples. We don't, if we have these patients, we've made initial screening diagnosis, we keep the sample until we have maybe 3 or 4 more, then we run for all of them. But because it's cumbersome, they run away from doing it. And then because we have already made a diagnosis somewhat and we have started treatment. So there is automation, which makes it faster. But the equipment are expensive. Another thing, donation came in. Donation came to our rescue. So I think a pharmaceutical company, international pharmaceutical company, donated about 5 or 7 equipment to strategic places, yes. But they donated reagents too, but they can't keep giving us reagents. We have to begin to buy the reagents, which are expensive. So those are the bottlenecks. Yes, the expertise is there. The equipment now is available somewhat. So, but if the equipment is readily available everywhere, there's nothing that says like secondary level hospitals cannot make should not be able to make a diagnosis. They don't need to always come to the teaching hospital.
Prof, and then you've mentioned costs now, even talking of the diagnosis, and not just the treatment at the treatment level. And it seems everything has been based on donations. Now let's assume donations were cut off. What's the cost like?
You see, for now, those initial screening tests, the PTA, PTT, 5,000 to 10,000 for the test.
Naira?
Yes, Naira. And it's a one-off thing. Once we made the diagnosis, except if the patient is going for surgery, and then we want to begin to look at whether we are correcting the level well. That's when we may need
but
to
there was
surgery.
one you said.
Yes.
Oh, you also get to the point where you undergo surgery.
Need to explain that.
Yes, you know, they are human beings. Everything that, like he said, he's like you. If they have anything that needs to have surgery on, they have to have surgery. And again, sometimes they bleed to the brain. Sometimes, although carefully, the neurosurgeons would not rush to go and do surgery. But if there's a need for it, they have to go in. But luckily, we can give those factors ahead of the surgery to control bleeding. So those are, but definitely many times, there are times that they need surgery.
You just mentioned bleeding in the brain.
Yes.
So are you saying it could occur anywhere, any part of the body?
I mentioned that. Even internally, there are times that we classify bleeding too. We say some are life-threatening. So once there is a bleeding in the brain, there is a bleeding around the neck, there is bleeding internally, we suspect GGI or the thigh, because you can lose your whole blood into your thigh. So yes, that's
Can
why.
it cause amputation?
Sometimes, if we delay management or there's complications, because there is one patient that we had to amputate. Yes, but we try to guard against that, but it can happen that way.
Let me add to what she said.
Okay, please go ahead.
Do you know, when you eat, sometimes you buy your tongues for hemophilia. That bleeding may not stop. People die through that. Yes. People die through bleeding from tongues. Even people can bleed to their eyes.
So this is to say they live an extra careful life. But even as careful as you might live, of course, we cannot be too careful. You mentioned, like we just mentioned, amputation now. That's, like you said, a very rare case. But when an hemophilia patient begin to feel these pains, does it also come with deformity at some point?
Yes, it does. When they bleed regularly into the joints, once you see them walk, the knees are bent or something. So, and that's why those who are donating the drugs are doing it. They said they don't want children growing up with deformity. So maybe we'll get there. We have on-demand treatment, prophylaxis. So they want all children to be placed on prophylaxis so that we prevent bleeding. Yes.
All children that you have diagnosed for
hemophilia. Yes. At least from age 2, those who are age 2 and below should be on prophylaxis. Okay. But unfortunately, we cannot sustain that.
Why?
Because we don't have enough. If I place some people on prophylaxis, the stock is going down. I reduce the prophylaxis and I attend to emergencies.
Before this drug emerged, there were other means of managing.
Yes.
So have those means been used to manage such that the drugs are not just expended and then there are no more to assist all this?
You know, it's blood and blood products. Like I alluded to that initially. I said, these factors are in the blood. So we have a way to separate. If you had fresh frozen plasma, it's the part of the blood that has all the components, the protein components. Then we can further reduce the volume and segregate to cryoprecipitates, which is what people with hemophilia A need. Okay. So it's blood product, but you know, with infections and so on, people are shying away from using blood products. And that's why this organization too came to donate, to say, okay, try to avoid using blood and blood products to treat hemophilia. So in the event that we are pushed to the wall, we may have to fall back. But then, to separate those blood components, we need cold centrifuges, which are very expensive and difficult to maintain.
Electricity.
Yes, so those are also challenges.
You mentioned prophylaxis, right, for children 2 years and below. And it sounds like it's very important for them, so they would not grow up with deformities. But now that it has been stopped because of the quantity, what has the association done about this so far? How have you come in to be a voice for those children?
Let me answer that. It's not that it has been stopped or it will be stopped. Just for now, because of the war, we don't have supply for now. And in fact, at Kaduna, they called me yesterday. Probably, I think they are trying to send another batch next month. We also have more factor for people. Okay. Then the prophylaxis is, as adults, the way we move around, we are very careful. But the children, they play a lot. So to prevent them bleeding often, that is why each child is given probably once in a week. So in case they bleed or to prevent bleeding,
is it to prevent bleeding or deformity?
To prevent, it's bleeding that leads to deformity. So what we want to prevent bleeding.
Okay.
So it's like we want to make the factor level in them to be, if not as you and I, at least to get to 1/3.
Okay.
So that if they get to that 1/3, they will be like mild hemophilia or even carriers.
Okay.
So they will rarely bleed. So that's the objective.
Okay, I have 3 questions. So I don't know who will answer before we go to treatment because of our time. In taking blood, imagine someone was sick and the person is giving blood. I know blood, they screen blood before giving. Do they also screen for hemophilia? I don't
screen for the disease.
For the disease, so that, you know, the person taking another person's blood does not eventually carry what he didn't have initially. It might be a child, you know. I'm just thinking in that direction. That's 1. 2, what is the link between hemophilia and varicose vein issue? The 3rd one, which might be to him, is the issue of legislation. You remember when we started talking about family planning, and there was support internationally, they were sending family planning, what's it called, contraceptives, they were sending into the country, and then we were looking for how to manage the consumables, you know, just like what you have narrated. And then some group felt that, look, there's a need to ask for legislation. Let there be a separate budget line for family planning consumables, so that whichever way, people will still get the family planning, you know, item for free, and then consumables too will be available. If not, people will not go for family planning if they have to pay, you know, and at the end of the day, they give birth to as many children as they didn't plan for. So those are the questions before we go to treatment. Because of our time.
Okay. Starting with whether you can get hemophilia from blood transfusion, no. We have said that it's a factor that is deficient, and rarely would a hemophilia patient go and say, I want to donate. Let's even say he says, I want to donate. When we give blood, we are giving because that person does not have enough. So the person we are giving has enough factor level. So yes, okay. so the giving, even if I give the person a blood from person with hemophilia, he has enough factor. So it's the volume that I'm replacing. Regarding varicose veins versus hemophilia, yes, you know, when I was talking, I said, God has made it such that you and I, as we are seated, our blood does not clot unnecessarily. And then we do not bleed unnecessarily. Those are 2 sides of what happens in coagulation. So excessive clot formation. So that is what happens with varicose vein. Then excessive bleeding with hemophilia. Of course, there are times that, very rarely, that somebody with hemophilia may have clotting, develop clot form problem. And usually it may be associated with some form of treatment, but rarely do they have, no, I won't say rarely they have varicose veins. Rarely do they have thrombosis, that is blood clots in their vessels.
Let me, because we talk about legislation.
Yes.
In fact, me, I will not say, I will not even talk about that. It's not even legislation. We know we identify some problems, let me say, challenges. Please, government need to help. Really need to dwell into treatment. I mean, the diagnosis, treatment, all this thing is done. We are talking about donation. At the stage, it can stop, just like you said. And if it does, what happens? People die. Those days, they manage with cryoprecipitate. Now, apart from the factor that is full FFP, fresh floating plasma, which is not as efficient as factor. So, government can look into that. Even our state, our government can look into that, can help us. We are even trying to see how we can have a desk officer that we will go to in case we need to see the governor, so our government can help in the area. Let me tell you, although as this disease can be dangerous when it's not well managed, but of course, when it's well managed, you can live your life. the way you want. You can do what others are doing. But government need to help. This donation we are talking about, that they give us, the treatment they give us from internationally, it is their government that is responsible. It is what their government give them. It is from that they pass down to us. If they are not responsive, how are we going to get how is it going to be passed down to us? So our government could take up the challenges and help us.
Well, I like to say that government will only take up what they understand and what they know. Maybe we're only privileged to get details about hemophilia and people at home listening and watching us this morning. So trust me, if you don't carry it, and that's why I brought up the issue of legislation, to their doorstep, they may not know the severity of this disease. So
let me come in. You are right. If they don't know, it's not their fault. Last year, during World Hemophilia Day, I think we did something like this, and somehow the CMD of UCH saw and then escalated it to the Minister of Health. And now we have a desk officer at the ministry in non-communicable diseases to take care of hemophilia issues, so which is a bonus. So like you said, if they don't know. So legislation, what are the things that government needs to do? Empower all, at least federal hospitals, to be able to make a diagnosis by automation, which makes life easy. I said equipment have been donated, support with the reagents, bring down the cost of those drugs. Don't let us just rely on imported or donations rather. So, I said year 2 below on prophylaxis. No, abroad, everybody goes on prophylaxis once you can afford it. If Mr. Anjoni can afford the drug, he might say, I want to go on prophylaxis. Just prescribe my drug for me. So if it is affordable, some people will say, yes, I don't want to be coming to the hospital with bleeds. I just want to take prophylaxis. I will pay for it because it has been subsidized.
How about parents with children with, hemophilia, and they can't afford even to eat well? How do they cope? I'm sure you have seen some of them. How do they cope? Because, again, to build your blood, you need to eat good food. You're talking about protein. It comes in diverse ways. How do they cope with hemophilia? And let's even look at it. In the last 10 years, Doctor, how many children have we lost? Or how many people have we lost to hemophilia? Or let me say in your state.
You know that, luckily, since this donation thing came on board, it had been a loss. Since 2018, UCH became a part of it. We lost a patient last year. Of course, it's not because of no factor. He is not really indigent because the family had been supportive of him too. But a time comes, family are tired. But luckily, these donations came in and we've been supporting him. So we cannot really say it's totally because of hemophilia that he had, because he had diabetes and some other things. So, but definitely there are people who cannot cope, mothers like you said. And that's why, Mr. Anjon, I said it earlier on, when we want to take hard stands, this patient, you are troublesome, you are not doing what we have asked you, he comes in to say, please. And so we manage, we give them. We keep saying, you have not paid, you paid last 2 years ago, blah, 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 but we still give, especially if it's emergency.
Now, let's go to treatment of hemophilia. Doctor, let me start with you. How can one treat and manage hemophilia throughout a lifetime? He's close to 50 and he's hoping to be 120. So how can he actually move from this stage, or from childhood to that stage?
Before I talk about the hematology aspect, I want to lay emphasis on the multidisciplinary treatment or care. We need orthopedic surgeons because it's joint things. We need physiotherapists. Yes, because when they are children, once there is pain, they don't want to use the joint there, so they may not walk well. So at that early stage, we want to refer to physiotherapy. We give factor before they go for the physiotherapy, and then with physiotherapy. So we need physiotherapists who will take interest in hemophilia. You know, by doing something often, you become more, become more of an expert in it. We need orthopedic surgeons who will be interested. Then dentists too. He mentioned a boy with yes, although partly his fault too. He wasn't going as often as the dentist said he should come. But we need all those people on board to take interest in caring for hemophilia patients. So when we talk about treatment, there are two ways to look at it. I talk about prophylaxis and on-demand. On-demand is what we have been doing. That is, I've bled as a hemophilia. I come to the hospital, doctor, I think I've bled, and I look at it, yes, you have bled. Then I give you treatment, then you go home. Then there is a prophylaxis. Okay, you have not bled, but we want to prevent bleeding. So we want to give you factor, maybe once, twice, 3 times a week, so that your level will be around a stage where you won't be bleeding. That's prophylaxis. We do it now mostly for children, but it's not supposed to be just for children. Everybody who can afford it should be on prophylaxis. He said a hemophilia patient should not box, should not do this. No, they can. If they are on prophylaxis, they are going for their sports. They take the drug, and then they can do any sports that they feel like doing. So living a normal life, that's what the goal of the foundation is. So now, treatment, there are different types. I talked about the drugs, the blood products, which we were using before, which we could also still fall back on in case there is a problem, and I hope we don't have to fall back on it. These new drugs that we are talking about are produced by using DNA technology, which is why they are very expensive. That's because they want to sidetrack all these infections from blood. So they genetically engineer the drug so that they can give us the factor. So the factor can be there without the adverse effect of infection. Then apart from providing the factor, there are other types that bypasses the factor in the system, use other ways. And then, we have monoclonal antibodies too, used for the drug, mostly for prophylaxis, so that people can get and not, then you don't have to go into the vein. You can give it subcutaneously, you can give it at home, or you can, so there are so many types.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. Mr. Anjorin, before we call it a wrap on the program this morning, I want you to say something to people who have people with hemophilia.
In fact, the essence of this program is to advocate for people that are likely to have this thing. Let them come out. It's not a death penalty. It's not that they can't live their life. It is when they come out, when they are treated, they can do whatever. In fact, I don't even know. Well, for me, I would say in Nigeria, because we are short of this factor, people should not go to extreme physical activities. Of course, there is a guy that used to do this sport, climb the mountain. In fact, he has climbed Mount Everest, yes. But in Nigeria, because we don't have all those ones, so you have to be careful.
Especially if you're not on a prophylaxis.
So then, just like I said, the head, we have Mrs. Megan. She's making some effort to get contact with those at the Senate, at the House of Assembly, so that things can be done as regards this. So government should come. It is all these things still boil down to government intervention of government. All the treatment, the diagnosis that we are talking about, it is the government there that is doing it for them. So let government come to their aid. Then the parent, then people should not stigmatize people living, because that one is also very important. They shouldn't stigmatize people living with hemophilia. They can do what you other people are doing. Me, I'm always a civil servant. I do my work diligently. I do other things. So people should, that is another thing, another message I want to give. Then the mothers, not sometimes, let me tell you, my own mother, those days before I was diagnosed at 14, before we got to know that this is what usually happens, when I cry, my mother will be crying with me, with my sister. 3 of us will be crying.
Because she has lost a child before?
Yes, when that pain was too much to bear. You have pain from the night till morning. You can just imagine.
Pains where? Where does the pain come?
In part, where
joints.
I bleed, yes.
Now, what's the difference between someone with hemophilia and someone with sickle cell? Because the way you've been explaining, you know, sickle cell people too usually have pains. I mean, I'm beginning to ask myself, are they closely or differently related?
They are different.
Yeah,
you know, what causes the pain in sickle cell disease is different. It's because there is loss of blood supply. If there is loss of blood supply to a place, there will be pain. But hemophilia, because they are bled into that place, if you see, you can bleed to your joint and it can be like as big as, yes, of course, that thing will be painful. And then you can't move, the place is very uncomfortable and so on.
So the mother should not be discouraged or frustrated. So when they see that, then another thing is, our people, even those that are diagnosed, that they know, they don't come to the hospital. When they call me, the first thing I will tell them, please go to the hospital. Even if you are owing dues, visit hospital. I'll talk to them there. So that is just what
all right, Prof. We know we have parents who are watching right now who do not have an understanding prior to this conversation, and now they've realized, oh, my child might actually have hemophilia over the years. What are the first aid measures they can actually take before proceeding to the hospital?
Yes, when a child bleeds or somebody bleeds, immobilize the joint. Don't use the joint excessively. Then put ice pack to control the bleeding and the pain. And then you can present to the hospital.
All right. Thank you so much. Jadisola, do you have...
Well, basically, maybe I'll just say one word. Do you have any other thing you would like to share?
Yes, I have many things to say. You see, he had said it, but I will repeat it. We have created this awareness. We all know the symptoms. If you have an idea, you think, oh, could this be hemophilia? Just come to the hospital and ask. Or you know somebody is bleeding, you say, don't you, it might be hemophilia, why don't you go to the hospital? Then sometimes we have our patients who inject themselves. We give them those factors. And sometimes we train them if they are bold enough to inject themselves. So when there's a ball, yes,
injections,
yes, because diabetic patients who inject themselves. So he says in school he avoids doing it. He wants his roommates to have gone because he doesn't want them to say he's on drugs. So it's not everybody that inject themselves that are on drugs. So I want people to
awareness.
Yes, to know that.
So when you have someone with hemophilia, do you also advise them to notify the school authority to avoid just associating them with people on drugs?
Yes, as much as, sometimes some of them don't want stigmatization, but we encourage them, go to the health center, speak to the doctor will understand that you have this thing. And of course they go there, yes, to inject, but it's easier, if he wants to travel now, he wants to inject himself so that because when he sits crammed up, he could bleed. And then there are times he goes to the motor park. He wants to sit in front. So there was a time he didn't get that. He said he wait for the next. They were abusing him, saying, he's doing guy. He doesn't want to sit with people at the back, blah, 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 but he didn't say anything. So sometimes we misjudge people. You and I too would have done it because we want the car to fill up on time. But that person had another reason, but we just assumed that.
Now, for someone, okay.
I think that on that note, we need to educate, drivers. They need to know because the truth, like I keep saying, they don't know, and so we can't blame them for lack of knowledge.
And for someone who is traveling, that has hemophilia, trying to avoid, blood in the joints, are there also measures, especially when you sit for a long, when you sit for a long time, maybe you wrap it with...
No. The best thing is just to get a factor given. Maybe yes.
Please, let me add to this. I know you are scared, you are afraid.
No, we are not.
As you grow up, as you get mature, you know how to manage it naturally. there is
From
one
experience.
of us, I'm telling you, there is a woman like that, is part of us. So the son got admission, and she was at Ife OAU. She was afraid, this is my son. How will he cope? I said, don't worry, he will manage himself. The guy is a graduate today. One. Then secondly, he's on his own. He's a computer engineer. He has opened with his friend a firm. He visited me yesterday, Toby. He has opened a firm with his friend. In fact, he's not even living with his parents. So that means he has been managed himself.
Over time, you learn how to manage
Time
yourself.
is fast spent. We must say a big thank you to you for, of course, sharing with us issues around hemophilia in Nigeria, the challenges, diagnosis, and the new treatment, which is the factor. I have learned that. I won't throw that away. But I want to say a big thank you on behalf of our producers and crew member, Professor Taiwo Kotila, who is a consultant hematologist at the University College Hospital. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
And of course, Mr. Oluwasegun Anjorin, who is the coordinator of Hemophilia Treatment Center, UCH.
And coordinator of people living with hemophilia.
Yes, with hemophilia. And we must say, we celebrate the, the International Day. You celebrate April 17th with you. And we pray that God will continue to give us more knowledge, to help people with hemophilia across the globe.
And of course, more interventions.
Amen.
All right, we'll go on a break, and when we come back, it's going to be Global Updates. Stay with us to go in.
It's another edition of Global Update on Saturday Special this morning. My name is Bimbo Akombi. Iran's foreign minister says, in line with the ceasefire in Lebanon, the passage for all commercial vessels through Strait of Hormuz is declared completely open for the remaining period of ceasefire. Iran's deputy foreign minister says Tehran rejects any temporary ceasefire and is seeking a comprehensive end to the war across the region. Celebrations in Lebanon, where a 10-day ceasefire has been announced to allow for negotiations between Israeli and Lebanese officials, the U.S. State Department said.
It's looking very good that we're going to make a deal with Iran, and it's going to be a good deal. It's going to be a deal with no nuclear weapon.
When is the next in-person round of negotiations on the war in Iran? When will
They're all
that take place?
important. I mean, it's not a question of around. All of them are
When will
important.
the next in-person
Probably,
meeting take
maybe
place?
over the weekend.
A Hezbollah official told press that the group will approach the ceasefire with caution and vigilance. Israeli forces pounded southern Lebanon in the hours leading up to the implementation of the ceasefire agreement on Thursday night, killing 3 people in a village in the Sidon district and 8 people in the Zahrani area, according to Lebanon's national news agency.
And over the last just over a year is that Donald Trump is not a very good evaluator of peace deals. Russia, Ukraine, Thailand, Cambodia. I know this is obviously a totally different, separate conflict. Each war is unique. But he's obviously adding his enthusiasm to try to give extra momentum to the talks, which is a good thing. Clearly, that alongside the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire, these are good things. And one would hope that they add momentum.
The 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon has come into effect, with celebratory gunfire heard in Beirut as the truce began. United States President Donald Trump announced the ceasefire on Thursday and confirmed that Iran-backed Hezbollah were also included in the cessation of hostilities. Joyous scenes occurred across Lebanon with barrages of gunfire ringing out across Beirut as residents fired into the air just after midnight in celebration. Displaced families began moving towards southern Lebanon and Beirut's southern suburbs, despite warnings by officials not to attempt to return to their homes until it became clear whether the ceasefire would hold.
الله يحمي الشباب والله يفرجها علينا جميعا تخلص القصة بشكل نهائي مش مؤقت ونرجع على بيوتنا وأرزاقنا.
Fighting has been ongoing between Israel and Hezbollah since the Iran-aligned Lebanese group joined the conflict in support of Tehran on March 2. That prompted an Israeli offensive in Lebanon 15 months after the neighbors' last major conflict. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he agreed to the ceasefire to advance peace efforts with Lebanon, but that Israeli troops will not withdraw from the security zone inside Lebanese territory. Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam welcomed the announcement, describing a ceasefire as a central Lebanese demand that they have pursued since the first day of the war, and the primary goal of Tuesday's meeting between Lebanese and Israeli officials in the United States. In the meantime, a man suspected of organizing a deadly attack on a Jewish restaurant in Paris has been arrested and placed in custody in France after being handed over by Palestinian authorities. Mahmoud Kader Abed Adra, also known as Hicham Hab, arrived in France on Thursday after Palestinian officials surrendered him to French authorities, a handover that French President Emmanuel Macron linked directly to France's recent recognition of Palestinian statehood. On August 9, 1982, 3 to 5 men threw a grenade into Joe Goldenberg, a Jewish-owned restaurant in the Rue du Rousset in Paris's historic Marais district before opening fire on the street outside. 6 people were killed and 22 wounded in the incident.
Every time I go past here, I see my dad's name, and those of the others too, so I'll never forget. What are you expecting now from the French justice system, he's asked. I expect them to be sentenced.
The attack was blamed on the Fatah Revolutionary Council, a Palestinian armed faction that had split from the mainstream Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO. Adra was arrested in the West Bank by Palestinian security forces in September last year. 2 other suspects are already in French custody, and in February, France's highest court confirmed that a trial would proceed, a ruling that had been challenged by the defendants.
Extradition procedures are complicated, so another battle lies ahead to ensure that these people can be put before a judge. And it's very important that justice is done, even though it's a long time afterwards, so we'll never give up.
Macron praised the Palestinian authorities' cooperation, saying it reflected a commitment by President Mahmoud Abbas to work with France on counter-terrorism. Thousands of prisoners in Myanmar have been granted amnesty or had their sentences reduced. The pardon order by Min Aung Hlaing is one of his first official acts since the coup leader became president this month. The move comes as the lawyer for jailed former leader Aung San Suu Kyi told the Reuters news agency that her sentence has been reduced. Former President Win Myint, detained since the 2021 coup, was also pardoned of his convictions, a statement from the presidency said. Min Aung Hlaing approved an amnesty for 4,335 prisoners, Myanmar's state television Emerald TV reported. A communique on behalf of Min Aung Hlaing said those serving death sentences shall have their sentences commuted to life imprisonment without naming specific prisoners. Amnesties typically happen as Myanmar marks Independence Day in January and its New Year in April. Among those to be released are 179 foreign nationals who will be deported. The amnesty also includes the commutation of all death sentences to life imprisonment, life sentences reduced to 40 years, and a 1/6 reduction in term length for all other prisoners. And finally, Burkina Faso's military government has ordered the dissolution of more than 100 associations and civil society groups, which rights groups are calling an attack on basic rights. It is the latest crackdown in the West African country months after the government issued a decree dissolving all political parties. The Ministry of Territorial Administration and Mobility announced on Wednesday the the dissolution of 118 NGOs and associations in accordance with current legal provisions and a ban on their activities. All are based in Burkina Faso, with many involved in the defense of human rights. Since taking power in a 2022 coup, the military government led by Ibrahim Traoré has cracked down on NGOs, unions, freedom of assembly, and opposition to military rule. Last July, Traoré signed a law restricting the workings of rights groups and syndicates. Within a month, the government revoked authorization for 21 rights groups and gave 10 others 3-month suspensions, citing administrative reasons. Amnesty International said the latest move showed an intensifying crackdown on civil society in the country. And that will be all on today's edition of Global Update on Saturday Special. My name is Bimbo Akambi. Enjoy your weekend.